Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome back to Barsetshire Week. Today I'm going to be talking about the second book in the Barsetshire series, and that is Barchester Towers. Chapter 1. Who will be the new bishop? In the latter days of July in the year 1850-something, a most important question was for 10 days hourly asked in the cathedral city of Barchester, and answered every hour in various ways. Who was to be the new bishop? So, Barchester Towers, the second book in the series, and one I absolutely love. It's a fascinating, wonderful book, and really where I fell in love with the series and sort of fell in love with Antony Trollope again. So first I'll talk about the sort of basic premise and then all the things I love about it. I don't think I can think of anything I don't like about it, so that section will be non-existent, so there we go. The book starts off with a new bishop arriving in town, Mr. Proudy and his wife Mrs. Proudy. They might be called the Proudies, I don't know, I've always called them the Proudies in my head, so I'm gonna call them the Proudies, but it is spelt proud. In my head, Proudy sounds more like a name. Anyway, we start off with the arrival of the Proudies in Barchester. This bishop who seems kind of okay, but his wife who is quite domineering over him, and very low church in comparison to the previous bishop who was more high church. So to quickly try and explain the differences between low church and high church within the Victorian Church of England. Basically, high church Anglicanism was more traditional and more focused on ritual and song, slightly closer in practice to Catholicism, though still quite different. Whereas low church within Victorian society is much more focused on sermons and on talking about the Bible, and is slightly closer to non-conformist religions, though both are within Anglicanism. That's not the best explanation out there. If you want to know a little bit more, do go and Google it and do some more research, but that is one sort of basic distinction as I understand it. So the Proudies arrive, along with the chaplain, Mr. Obadiah Slope, who was one of the best characters in the whole series. Horrible, slimy, but oh, so brilliant. Such a wonderful creation. And they are very low church in comparison to Dr. Grantley, the old bishop's son, and Mr. Harding and his family, and people who are more high church Anglican. And so the book kind of revolves around church politics, but there's also a love story in there involving a woman who is in her late 20s and a widow, which is just not a typical Victorian love story, which is something I love about this book. And there's so much more going on in there. There is another new family in town, Stanhopes, and so many exciting dramatic things go down. I want to talk about the things that I love about this. One thing I love is the church politics, because it is, in many ways, like sort of modern office politics. There are factions within the sort of church life and the clergy of this town, and the factions are a bitter war, and they are horrible to each other. For people who all work in the church or are married to people in the church, they are pretty low in their battle tactics in ways that are sort of wonderful and hilarious and just brilliant to read. There are also some wonderful, wonderful characters depicted in this book. The Proudies, or the Proudies, I think I'm gonna just say them interchangeably now. They're a really interesting pair. As I said, there are battles between factions, but also there is a battle between the Proudies, between the married couple, because Mrs. Proudy has much stronger beliefs than her husband, who is kind of a meek man at heart, and would like to avoid conflict at all stage. But most of all, he knows that he must avoid conflict with his wife because he is slightly scared of her, and therefore he just goes along with a lot of what she suggests. But also he slightly resents that, and the dynamic between them is really interesting, and she is a fascinating character. As I spoke about in my discussion on the whole series on Monday, she's one of those characters who you dislike so vehemently in this book, and yet as the series goes on, you do come to understand her a little bit more. One of the best characters in this book has got to be Obadiah Slope, who is just, oh, he's so slimy. There's just no other way to describe him. He is creepy and slimy and horrible and so awful, and yet also there are moments towards the end of this book where you so nearly understand him, and where you get glimpses of his chances of happiness if he had been a slightly different person, or if he had had slightly different priorities, and it's wonderful, it's so good, it's so well done, it's so brilliantly done. I also love the sort of unconventionality of this book as a Victorian novel, like the two kind of love stories going on in this book, and the two women who end up being love interests for various characters. One is a 27 or 8-year-old widow with a baby. That's just so rare for a Victorian heroine in a love story to be that. And the other, Signora Narini, is a British woman who lived for many years in Italy and married an Italian man, and she is disabled, she can't walk. She's incredibly beautiful and alluring and fascinates so many of the men she meets. She's a brilliant, really interesting, well-developed character. She's not a very nice person, but you also understand why she's not very nice, and there are moments, as with Obadiah Slope, where you see moments of sort of potential happiness for her, or moments where she could be happier if she was slightly nicer, in what's a really interesting way. There are so many interesting themes in this book as well. Themes of family, themes of love, themes of gossip, themes of church politics, as I've already spoken about, themes of morality and division within society, themes of what it means to live in a small town. It's so very centred on Barchester as a place and how this place with so much gossip and the fact that there are so many of these people that hate each other, yet for the sake of society, because it's a small town, they also feel the need to invite each other to dinner and to like each other's parties, even though they despise each other. It's a wonderful, such a fascinating like microcosm of Victorian society in such a brilliant, beautiful way. It's also incredibly funny and moving and beautiful. I think the love story in here is really, really good. I know that some people say it's not developed enough for them, but it's developed enough for me, and I think it's very, very good and very well done, and quite different to a lot of the love stories you get in Victorian novels. Like always, I love Antony Trollope's writing in here, and there's a moment where you're worried that a particular plotline might go a particular way, and Antony Trollope just assures you that you don't need to worry about that. In such quite like a sweet, lovely way. Like Antony Trollope just wants to make sure the reader's okay with everything that's going on and completely aware. I think it's such a brilliant, brilliant book. I can't recommend it enough. One of my favourites in the series, I would say, and certainly like of the first 3 books in the series, it's my favourite, though the last 3 books in the series are like also brilliant, brilliant, brilliant books. So yes, I would highly recommend this one, as I would with the whole of the series. I think that's all I have to say about it, because I don't really have anything negative to say about this book, and if I had read it more recently I might have even more positive things to say about it, but it has been about 2 years now since I read this one. I remember reading this on the train back from somewhere, I can't remember where, but I was at Paddington Station and I got off the train, and like the walk from my platform to the tube was too long to wait to read the rest of it, to finish like the last 10 pages, so I just like sat on the platform and like finished it off. That's how good this book is. So yes, another brilliant one in the Barchester Chronicles, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about Dr. Thorne, which is the 3rd book in the series.